All right, good evening, everyone. We'll call the Urban Affairs Committee meeting to order at 7:33. Council Roby will be here shortly to join us, but she said to go ahead and get started with the first item. We have two items on this evening's agenda. The first order is order number 23-100-8872, which is a communication from Attorney Falk on behalf of the Marlborough Apartments Partners 2 LLC regarding proposed zoning amendment to Chapter 650 zoning, Executive Residential Overlay District. And the second order this evening is order number 23-100-8721, a proposed ordinance amendment to Chapter 650 zoning relative to provisions regarding mixed use and affordable housing. So we'll start with the first order, which is order number 23-100-8872, and I'll ask the applicant to come on into the well. And just to update the committee members, so you have the package in front of you. This change really changes three items in the current order or section of the zoning code 650-36. The first one just allows that the special permit granting authority adds a provision that unless it's modified by Mass General Law Chapter 40A, which is in anticipation of the housing rules that are coming down the pike. And the second part is to expand the number of units within the Executive Residential Overlay District from 475 to 950. And the third one is to allow mixed-use developments consisting of a combination of by right or special permit residential uses as listed in this section. So, Attorney Bergeron and Andy, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves and anything you want to say to get started, and then I'll turn it over to the Urban Affairs Committee members for questioning.
Hello, my name is Arthur Bergeron. I'm here as the B team. You usually get the A team, but Brian Falk and our firm, we actually represent about a dozen communities on the other side as town council. And so this is town council season, this is town meeting season, and so that's why he wasn't at the planning board and I was, and now I'm here. But I watched the presentation, the public hearing here, and I think that you have a good sense of this project. I know there were some questions that came up at the public hearing that my friend here, Andy Montelli, has done some research and I want to respond to. So I'm just going to turn it right over to him to deal with that, and then if we've got any other questions, happy to respond to them. Mr. Montelli.
Mr. Bergeron. Andy Montelli, Post Road Residential. Samantha actually had some questions she raised and at the first hearing, and we did a little research, and it revolved around public service and how much public services we're really consuming over there, specifically police and fire calls. And I spoke to a sergeant at the dispatcher's office, a gentleman in administration, and we were able to get some numbers, as well as some opinions, his opinions. So the date that they measured is January 1st, 23 to May 26, 23. And in that time, there were 4 calls by the fire department out to the project. I know at least, now that was the period where we're bringing the building online and you're turning on the fire monitoring systems. So there's usually a false alarm or two in that initial startup. So I'm guessing of the 4, there might have been a false alarm or two. And then on the police side, there were 5 what they call incidents. There was something called the disturbance. There's a harassment order violation, suspicious motor vehicle, suspicious activity, and vandalism. I didn't really know how that compared or what the sergeant thought about that, so we kind of engaged in a conversation, and the gentleman said, and I'm quoting things that he said, the call volume doesn't seem like a lot. He said it seems very quiet over there, And he says, these calls haven't been significant. So what I took away is that from the point of view of the police department and fire department, it feels like we've been pretty quiet. They haven't been disturbed by us for any reason. I think that was the only question I had been asked and wanted to follow up with, so.
And the only other thing I'll mention regarding the tax issue that I know there was a tax issue that was brought up originally in terms of the potential revenue here.
Yeah.
And so, and we went back and.
Yeah, I could talk a little bit about that. When you put phases 1 and 2 together, our tax bill, and those are the projects that are approved and now under construction.
Or done.
Or done, yeah. We will be close to, if not we'll be one of the highest taxpayers in the city. We may be the highest. And when Avalon's project in Marlborough is the first highest, TJX is the second highest. We'll be right neck and neck with them. It'll be a little bit of a race. And then if phases 3 and 4 were ever approved, that would really basically double the number of units and therefore double the amount of taxes. So we would then become by far the largest taxpayer in the city.
Thank you, Mr. Montelli. I did want to just update the council. So the applicant did go before the planning board to present the zoning change, and Council Roby's really good about not doing anything till we hear back from the planning board. So in your package is a letter that I'll just read, dated June 9th from the planning board. Dear City Council, at its regular scheduled meeting on June 5th, the planning board took the following action regarding the above referenced order, which is the zoning change. On a motion by Dr. Fenby, seconded by Mr. LaVenture, the board voted to make a favorable recommendation to the City Council for the amendment to Chapter 650-36 Executive Residential Overlay District. And then voting in favor were planning board members Fay, Fenby, Fortin, LaForce, LaVenture, and Ross. No one voted against it, so it carried 6-0. The planning board also provided the following reasons for reaching its recommendation. The developer established that the proposed zoning amendment is consistent with the character of the surrounding neighborhood and is isolated from the nearest single-family homes. In the planning board's opinion, approval of the zoning amendment would not be overly burdensome to the neighbors. The developer established the proposed zoning amendment would be beneficial to the city. And finally, the developer established the proposed zoning amendment would be in keeping with the intent and the purposes of the city's zoning ordinance. So the planning board then looked favorably on this as well. So with that, I will open it up to questions first from the Urban Affairs Committee members. If any of the Urban Affairs Committee members have any questions or comments for the applicant? Seeing none, I'll open up to the rest. Oh, I'm sorry, Council Landis.
I just want to make a comment. One of those police calls, it was a strange car up in the parking lot. I think it was my car. Because I used to go out there quite a bit when that was under construction. I was curious. I love that project.
So you think that's why in the police report the name was redacted?
Yeah.
That might be the reason.
Yeah. I'm only kidding when I say that, but, I've been out since the fundraiser out there too, and I watched the part 2 being done, and I have to say I go next door up on the hill.
Yeah.
And I can see it better. But it's amazing. And as I was telling a couple of people, phase 1 and 2, when 2 is done, phase 3 and 4, even if it's 3 to 5 years down the line, quite honestly, it's not going to put much traffic on Crosby Road. That's where I live, the other side of town, because just the way the whole thing is laid out, with the exit there on 495 and companies like that. I hope some of the people do go downtown and frequent our restaurants and shop at our supermarkets and so forth, but that'll be spread out. It's an amazing project. So when I eventually see maybe 900 units there, that doesn't bother me at all down the line.
Thank you.
That's all.
Thank you, Council Landers. Any else? Council Pearlman?
Thank you, and good to see you both again. I was also at the planning board meeting, so it was nice to kind of hear some information in addition to the public hearing before the council. Just wanted to follow up on some of the things that the planning board brought up that might be helpful for everyone here, to also hear. I know there was discussion about public use of the trails. I wanted to know if you all had any further thoughts on that. I know it was discussed a little at the planning board meeting, but would love to hear if that's still the intention to have public access and what that might look like, since you have done a good job of maintaining the wetlands, and I know you gave a good overview of how the buildings are constructed to support the wetlands, and I think that would be helpful for everyone else to hear.
Sure. We are definitely open to the idea of opening the trail system. We've floated this a little bit with our partners, and there would have to be some sort of a system to kind of make sure that we don't have liability if there's something that happens. But if we get approved, I think that's something we'd be very happy to consider. We can start those conversations with Priscilla at any time.
If I could, I just want to caution the council. If you remember our discussion on 272 Lincoln Street about the park out front, we start crossing a dangerous threshold with using private property for public use. So, though it sounds attractive, there is liability that's taken on, so you've got to be very careful. They can consider it, but for us to mandate, that's not, again, that's not part of the zoning change. We can talk about it, but it really has nothing to do with the zoning change and letting, again, it's private property. It's like saying, okay, well, I want to go down, walk amongst Royal Crest or the other apartment complexes. It's a different animal, so I just be cautious with that, that's all.
Mm-hmm. No, I definitely hear that, and we weren't necessarily saying to mandate it. It was just a discussion, given, I know some of the other properties, even with Boston Scientific, some of the land back there, that people are able to walk through the trail. So just something I think would also showcase to people who don't live in the building, right, that there's goodwill towards the city, and having people also see what's being done there. I think, there was another topic that maybe leads into my next question about concerns from the planning board just about making sure this area wasn't seen as a separate, isolated area where everyone who lives there, right, stays on the property and doesn't necessarily interact with the city overall, and that it's not like an enclave within the community, since there's, I know Councilor Landers brought up downtown, and we want people to be going to the restaurants and all the shops in our city and supporting that. So I don't know if there were anything you wanted to add from the planning board about efforts to engage with the wider community, and you've done a great job to ensure that the facility offers many amenities and how, they still will want to engage with the city overall.
Yeah, so our customers are young and affluent, and we provide a great place for them to live, but all the other parts of your life don't take place at our community. We don't have a restaurant, we don't have a library per se. The grocery store is on Route 20, so these are the people who are probably using the restaurants and the services along Route 20 on a per capita basis more than anybody else in town, because they're not that into cooking themselves, and they have the discretionary income to go out and enjoy the city. And so, yeah, they all live in one spot. I think, as it's been pointed out, that has its advantage from a traffic perspective, right? We're not creating traffic jams elsewhere in town, but these people are using the city services, significant to it, especially for the shopping, entertainment, restaurants. They're out all the time.
I should add, though, just from a and I understand Barbara Fenby's point, and we've all, that's been an issue kind of as we've talked about apartments, but we should also understand that the average length of time that a tenant stays is about 2 years. You're not going to see any of these folks becoming planning board members or becoming, they're just not. That's kind of in the nature of people who are kind of coming and going. Just there's not many apartment owners or not many renters are in leadership positions here in the community, right? among other reasons, because they're coming and going. So I think you can talk about there's going to be a substantial economic impact in terms of, right? Andy gave an example of one of the units that he had rented, and then the people have since left, and the stove hadn't been used yet, right? I mean, these people are going out to eat like a lot, So I think they'll be spending money, but I think that other piece, it's a real challenge, and we're happy to talk about that, and we're happy to talk about that through the permit process. There may be ways to engage that. But I think that's a piece that we need to keep in mind, that the turnover really is tremendous.
I appreciate the context about the turnover, and, it's nice to kind of have that example of, a few years and the stove not being used. It's just something, I think we should always keep in the back of our mind, because even if they are only there for 2 years, like how to make the most of those 2 years to be engaging, and that I know you all have done a great job of incorporating more place-based understanding in the building and the current structures, right? Use of some of the wood and referencing areas. So I just think that also associating that they're not just in an apartment complex off of 495, but they're in Marlborough, and what that means is really important, so that they're still welcomed in the community and not just, oh, what's that building over there that I've seen going up, but that it's something people are familiar with. And then my other question was around, I know the phasing. I think it came up in the main public hearing that we had before the city council of, if this were to move forward, what the development timeline might be, and I just wanted to reiterate that question, see if it had shifted at all, just given a lot of construction happening all over the city, but knowing this is, in a particular area, what the intention would be for the third and fourth building if it were approved.
Excuse me, but before you answer, I'm sorry that I'm late coming in as chair of this committee, and I don't know what was discussed before, but I think the committee needs to understand that there's really only 2 things we're voting on. Do we want to increase the number of units, and do we want to allow mixed use? Anything else will be a discussion once this is changed and they come back and bring the information for the special permit or mixed use. So I don't want to waste a lot of time with them here, their time, the lawyers' time, our time, on questions that are still at this point philosophical or unknowns, if nobody minds. So I don't know if...
No, I will turn the reins back over to you, Madam Chair, so thank you very much. You have the show, and I know Council Perlman was finishing, Council Dumas has some questions, and I don't know about anybody else.
Okay. So if you're okay with...
Yeah, I was just going to say
moving into the unknown and sticking with what we really have before us,
yes.
I think that would probably...
And for context, we didn't dive into too much before you got here, so you didn't miss anything. And I was also trying to give you some time, so hopefully that was helpful to have some of those questions, and I'll turn it over to you.
I know we went into a lot of this at the public hearing with questions from the council at the last meeting. So I'm sorry, Councilor Dumas, you had?
Yeah, no, I just, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say that to Councilor Perlman's point, your Instagram on the boroughs are supporting local businesses throughout Marlborough, so I think you're very in tune with getting your residents out into the actual city rather than them staying there, so kudos to you in supporting local. And having said that, being the Ward 3 City Councilor, I would have a lot of reservations with the amount of units that are coming into this, but since day one, I think you guys really hit it out of the park with understanding Marlborough, what Marlborough needs. You generally care about the community. I think as a ward councilor and us as a city council team in a union, we need to find out what projects actually work best and if it's in the right location. I think you have the right location, you have the right success. You are a success story in what you're doing, and that's the type of developers that I personally wanted to work with since day one sitting on this council, who understand and appreciate Marlborough. I don't personally have a problem with making this jump only because of what you have done and what your results are. So I thank you for that. I think you are a role model for any other developer that comes into Marlborough, and for that epitome of success is not unnoticed. So I thank you for that. And I think if anyone goes into the boroughs from the outside community who is concerned about the units, if they just take a tour of your facility or they meet you and get to shake your hand, I think they understand why I would approve this jump to 950. Thank you.
All right, and I'm sorry, who else had questions? Councilor Landers?
No, I'm all set. I I just gave my support for this. I have, to be honest, Madam Chair, I have no reservations about this going up to 900 because of the location. And as I kiddingly said, I don't see the traffic coming down on Crosby Road from here because you've got pretty good road system out there. And plus, 495 is, 100 yards away? No, it looks good. I'm very satisfied with what I see there, too.
Counselor Navin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to echo a little bit of what Councilor Dumas said. Andy, I just want to thank you and the team. I was not here when the original permit was approved, but since I have been here, I've found you guys to be very responsive and responsible, and I appreciate that, having toured the facility, but also knowing that when there are issues, I have never experienced you guys saying, no, we can't do that, or, oh, it's too expensive, or, oh, this isn't going to work for X, Y, and Z. You guys are always said yes, or let us think about that, and, to the point that was already made. There are certain developers that we should be doing business with, and we do appreciate that. Just pointing to the time where you had issues when you guys were blasting early on, and you got one complaint, and you made sure that it was addressed, and we got no more complaints during that process. So, that is very, very important when you're doing the kind of construction you're doing. So I appreciate your responsiveness, and you're willing to invest here. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Madam
Anybody?
Chair?
Oh, I'm sorry. Counselor Austin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I would like to just express one of the things that I found very rewarding about this project. This is one of the few projects that has over-delivered on what they said. I mean, it's not to say anything bad about our other developers. I mean, they do what they say in the drawings, but these ones have come in, and Andy's team has over-delivered. And I see that continuing on phase 2, and should the committee, I would endorse the zoning change for phases 3 and 4, but this is a project that I think would suit the city extremely well going forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, if I could just mention, by the way, since everybody's in a good mood, we're just asking, to the extent that the council could recommend that this move quickly through the city council, or that it could be acted on a suspension, like at the next meeting or soon, it would be really helpful. If that happened, we'd be prepared to actually be getting our special permit for the next phase filed almost immediately, so that we can be, because as we mentioned during the public hearing, the issue is we've got a lot more permitting to do after we do that, because we've got obviously we have wetlands issues, we have MEPA issues, we have a lot to do, and so but we can't do that until we've done this. So we really want to kind of move the permitting if we can. I realize you folks you're busy, but I just wanted to mention that.
And I'm sorry, you're talking about phase 2 of the project, or are you talking phase 3 and 4?
I think that we'd be coming in with a special permit at least regarding phase 3 really quickly. And 4.
3, 4.
And new 3.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking 2 years in the future.
Oh, yes, in terms of construction and stuff, but we've got 2 years of permitting to do. I guess that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of steps to go through because the project is larger. We've got more MEPA things that we have to deal with. There's a lot of stuff that we need to do, which is why we're going to try to. This is a good time for us to be working on it, because the construction, I want to say, is coming to an end, but it's closer. So that's why that's the only reason why we're asking if possible, if the council can consider this quickly, given the fact that there seems to be pretty broad support. That would be great. If not, we understand.
Was there discussion before I got here that anybody had an issue? I take it you would be asking for us to suspend at our next meeting rather than waiting until July?
If you could, yes.
I can certainly ask for the suspension. I know that there are some concerns about the number of suspensions we're doing, but so far we continue to do that. So we'll see what happens based on tonight's vote, and then at the next meeting.
And I can say I haven't asked one for 3 years.
That's true. And I know that in the letter that Attorney Falk sent, he did give his opinion on the amendment requiring only 6 votes. I have not had a response from the solicitor to give his opinion. I don't know if Attorney Falk would have anything further to offer other than what he has in his initial letter dated.
We spoke about that, he would not.
Okay. So we will wait to see what the solicitor's opinion is on that part, and depending on it, would modify number 1. Otherwise, if any discussion, Councilor Navin?
No, I was just gonna, I assumed you were entertaining a motion.
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, motion to approve the zoning amendment.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the order with a possible amendment to number 1, depending on what the solicitor has for us. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. We are missing a member. All right, so I will report this out at the next meeting. I will ask for a suspension and go from there. Thank you. Just give them a couple minutes to pack up, and then we can continue with the second part of the agenda.
It's good to see you.
All right, I think we're ready to take up part 2 of tonight's agenda, which is order number 23-108-721F, the proposed ordinance amendments to Chapter 650 zoning relative to certain provisions concerning mixed use and affordable housing. So I had created some language, had sent it for an agenda. It was referred to committee and not advertised. My sense was that this meeting could be a meeting of the minds. We can have discussion on what you got sent by me, which does include some new information from the original of what I sent. It also includes the changes that we talked about when the mayor vetoed the other order that was in there. So it's kind of a mishmash. I believe everybody had received a copy of what I put together and then the copy of the solicitor's comments. I think it would be helpful, if nobody minds, if we just go through it with the solicitor's comments. Some of them I can take care of, some of them I think are worthy of discussion. And it's 8 o'clock, so I don't really want to go later than 9 unless people really are into this. I think we can try to set up another meeting. I don't expect this to be completed in one night, so I'm sort of in a hurry, but not that much of a hurry, and I certainly want input from people. And so slow me down if you don't see me looking in your direction and you have comments. Just yell. Actually, don't yell, but just let me know. All right, so the whole idea of this is pursuant to Section 5, Chapter 40A, be it ordained that the City Council of the City of Marlborough, that Chapter 650 of the Code, as most recently amended, be further amended. Number 1 is by amending Chapter 650 zoning, Section 650-5 definitions, subsection B, mixed use, definition to read as follows. New text as underlined, deleted text shown as strike through, and I'm going to try to read it with how it would read if we approved all of this, because I think it gets confusing otherwise. So new to this would be area medium income, in parentheses AMI, the housing area median family income set forth in or calculated from regulations promulgated by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development pursuant to Section 8 of the Housing Act of 1937, as amended by the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974, determined for the Boston, Cambridge, Quincy, Massachusetts, New Hampshire metropolitan statistical area and adjusted for family size, or if such income standard no longer exists, such other equivalent income standard determined by the Community Development Department with the advice of the Affordable Housing Trust. And that is my error. I copied this directly from, I think it was Cambridge's language. They have an affordable housing trust. That whole piece should not be there. It should just say adjusted for family size. If we want to have it, or another regulation promulgated by HUD, but I don't know that there would be another regulation. So it should really just end at metropolitan statistical area and adjusted for family size. Unless somebody thinks that we should put some other kind of if those standards no longer exist.
Madam Chair?
Anybody have a question on Councilor Ossing?
Yeah, no, so I agree, because my first thing was, we don't have a community development department, and I didn't know what a affordable housing trust was, so I'm glad you picked up on that, so thank you. The other one is the, and I didn't go look for the Housing Acts of 1937 and 74. Are those readily available, that what I would call the builder or whoever's coming in to look to rent their units, is that something that's readily available and we're not?
I think they're readily available. I found them pretty easily just by Googling the information, so, and I
No.
know there are multiple articles with information about lotteries that use the statistics from that across the Commonwealth, in the Boston Globe anyway.
No, I just want to be in a position where I know what people want to do, but now we got to actually go do it. So it sounds good, but now I got to go send a developer to go find something, and they're going to come back with something. Are we going to be happy with it? I just want to make sure we've all looked at it and said, yep, we think this is the right thing. It changes yearly, I assume, or?
Is yearly, and that's why I think trying to put something in here with specific numbers isn't going to work.
I
So
concur.
leave it as vague as possible,
Okay.
but something that can be referred to that does have numbers. Anybody on this side? Okay. Another new definition is called eligible household. A household whose gross household income does not exceed the corresponding percentage of AMI specified in section 650-26. And again, this is language taken from another city, but I think it's still relevant. I know that the issue for the planning board when we started all this was, what's low income and who does this include? So having these two definitions hopefully would help in that. No questions? Okay. Mixed use. So this was one of those that was already in some of this information, but we would be changing it to read, the first one doesn't change at all. It's a combination of permitted Y or special permit residential business uses as listed in 650-17 Table of Regulations for a particular zoning district located on the same lot and arranged vertically in multiple stories of a structure or horizontally adjacent to one another in one or more buildings. So it is changed to read as pretty much one paragraph. Number 2, to achieve a mix of new language residential to business uses such as retail or restaurants that is balanced and compatible,
Amen.
period. Compatible. Ground floors of buildings fronting, oh, that's not reading correctly. That is balanced and compatible. There's my original.
So, Madam Chair, to me, it's okay going through this, but recognizing we'll need another go around, because we're gonna wanna clean it up in a format that we can actually see it.
You did see it once, and it reads, to achieve a mix of residential to business uses such as retail or restaurants that is balanced and compatible, ground floors of buildings fronting streets or public access ways shall be restricted to back to non-residential uses except as specified below. So getting all of those strikeouts and new combined. I think when this was before us before, everybody got a clean copy. And we don't have unless you printed out something that showed that. So that was pretty much in the language that was vetoed by the mayor. Number 2 of that then says by amending, and amending is new, Chapter 650 zoning, Section 650-26, affordable housing, to read as follows. New text shown as underlined and deleted text shown as strike through. And this one is another error on my part that should read 650-26 and affordable should not have a strike through. I was trying to come up, there is, and now I'm blanking on what it's called, I was going to look it up. Mass General Law has another section that I sort of looked at incorporating and decided it wasn't worth, it had too many other issues and parameters, and I just went back to affordable housing, but I forgot to remove the strike through for affordable. So it should still read affordable housing. I'm adding a new purpose: to promote the public health, safety, and welfare by accommodating the expansion of mixed-use and residential opportunities throughout the city, by providing for a full range of housing choices throughout the city for households of all incomes, ages, and sizes in order to meet the city's goal of preserving diversity, by mitigating the impacts of mixed use and residential developments on the availability and cost of housing, and especially housing affordable to low and moderate income households, and by increasing the production of affordable housing to meet anticipated housing and employment needs throughout the city. And I am open to anybody's adding, deleting, not liking it, wanting something else. It was, again, copying language from another city that I liked the language. I think it sort of helps people, it helps set the tone for the rest of the language in the affordable housing piece. All right. A, and on this part, I will go back to the section that was vetoed by the mayor, had as A, this section 650-26 shall apply to all developments that result in or contain 8 or more dwelling units in all zoning districts for the following types of uses: multifamily dwellings or mixed-use development containing multifamily dwellings. This section shall apply as set forth above unless an exception is otherwise stated in this section 650-26. Compliance with this section shall be made a condition of any special permit or site plan approval that is required for the development. And I missed copying that piece. I don't know if it's important in that what we have reads all new language site plan approvals granted for multifamily dwellings as part of a mixed-use development, and all special permits granted to applicants to construct multifamily dwellings, thereby increasing the number or density of residential dwellings to a number or level greater than that allowable as a matter of right under the zoning classification for the subject parcel shall require the following. So I know you don't have that language. I was going to provide it for you, but I don't even know what, I've been gone for a week, and
Okay.
I'm not sure what date is, let alone what the date is, so I do apologize. If anybody has that language from the original, it may be a discussion I can have and have it ready for the next meeting so that we can kind of look at, can they be combined into one? Do we really need that other piece, and can we just start with that? So I'll leave it at that for now. The number 1 on that is developments of 8 or more units. This takes care of the suggestion, well, that's actually what we had, development of 8 or more units. 1A is the number of on-site affordable units. A development subject to this section 650-26 shall provide at least 12% of the dwelling units to be constructed for home ownership or rental purposes will be made available at affordable prices to eligible home buyers or renters. If, when applying the specified percentage to the total number of units to determine the required number of affordable units, the resulting number of affordable units includes a fraction of a unit. This fraction, if equal to or over 1/2, shall be rounded up to the next whole number. So that last piece was a suggestion on the original that was vetoed by the solicitor, and the original 15 that we had got changed to the 12 suggested by Councilor Ossing. Councilor Wagner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just got lost for a minute. I thought that when we were talking about this, it was about rentals and the rental projects that are building, and then this, maybe I missed something, but it's surprising me that we're talking about now home ownership. So by reading this, if this was to pass, are you saying, so if a developer was to come in and build houses and a housing, a single-family home, that would be impacted by it? Because that would be lovely, but I don't see how that would work.
Home ownership was in the original that was vetoed by the mayor, and I think the idea of having it was not single-family home ownership, but condominium home ownership.
Okay.
And we wanted to make sure
Do
that
we need to-
condominiums were included. They still own their home, technically, so.
But the way this is written, it feels like it could apply to a development with separate single-family homes.
Well, it
just me
is, if you
that's-
go back to A, the part that's not in here, but it says, shall apply to multifamily dwellings or mixed-use development containing multifamily dwellings.
Okay.
So it's specific to those.
Okay.
But those could either be rental or condominium.
Okay, thank you.
All right, the new, of the 12% of the dwelling units constructed for home ownership or rent at affordable prices, 10% shall be sold or rented to families with at least 50% and no more than 80% of AMI. The remaining 2% shall be sold or rented to families with at least 30% and no more than 50% of AMI. And then C, and then we'll get to the comment. C is after initial occupancy, the gross household income of an eligible household shall be verified annually to determine continued eligibility and rent. So the solicitor's comment on that first part was categories may overlap at 50% AMI. An example may be helpful to include if a development has 100 units, then pick a number. Units are 50% to 80% AMI, and pick a number. Units are 30 to 50 if a development has 33 units. I just did this because this, again, it was language I copied, and that was how they did it, and I debated whether to just put it at least 50%, at least 50, so to go that lower. I am open to what, and then the second part before we discussion was rental units only, and I guess my sense, once you've applied for and gotten a mortgage for a condominium, there's nothing that we have to do with it. If you don't make your payments, you lose the condominium. So I think to begin with, they have to meet some standards, but once they own that house, it's kind of out of our control. That's why I didn't put home ownership. So back to the splitting, I was just trying to make it so that we covered that lowest, but not giving them, not making it a lot of them, to maybe make this amenable to the mayor, maybe to the population. So you can think about it. We don't have to get into heavy discussion tonight if nobody wants to, or if you have comments, I would appreciate it. Councilor Ossing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So at the risk of giving people a popsicle headache on this, all right? So again, item B, so 12% of any new, if this goes through, 12% of any new complex is gonna have affordable units. 10% of the 12%, which really isn't 10%, you're saying 10% of those 12% affordable. So, okay, anal engineer now comes out on me that says, okay, how do I back down to what's the smallest project that I can actually have to actually have a project that's gonna give me one unit that falls within your 2% category, and then how much is it? So I'll use one that's relatively easy. The Green District, assuming 240 units for phase 2, all right? So that's, take 12% of that, that's 29 units, and there will not be a test when I'm done yapping about this. But but it's to illustrate a point. So of those 29 units, as this states here, it's not really 10%, you're really talking 83% of those 12%, because that's just 10 divided by 12. Again, I'm going down the engineering wormhole, so that says 24 of those 29 units will be in that category of 50 to 80%, and then 5 would be, and then 17%, which is 2 over 12, of those 29 units would be 5. So you can say, okay, it applies there. So then how small a complex do I have before I can't get my 30 to 50% requirement, right? So again, I won't go over all my boring details, but a 25-unit complex, all right, per the rules, if we go this way, 12% of 25-unit complex comes out to 3 units, all right? Following your suggestion of 10% of those 3 units, which is really, you're talking 10 over 12, not really 10%. That's, so what I'm driving at is the verbiage doesn't really work. I know what your point is, but to get to where we want to go, I'm not sure that's, I think it should be a percentage of the 12%, not 10%, because it doesn't really work. But anyway, so of the 25-unit complex, 3 units would have to be affordable, and if you're going to apply, you want some to be in the 30 to 50% range and some to be in the 50 to 80% range. Again, if you're going to say 10% of the 12%, but it's really 10% of the units, that's the minimum. That means 2 would have to be between the order of 50 to 80%, and 1 would be at the 30 to 50. Anything less than 25 units, the formula doesn't work. You're not going to get there. So if you don't have a popsicle headache yet, I can take you out later and really make it hurt. But I just think that, I understand what you're trying to do, Madam Chair. You're trying to say, okay, for affordable, we want a good portion of affordable to be in this range of AMI and this portion to be in that, but that should really just be a clear out what percentage of the affordables you want, just to make it easy. And again, that whole number thing, so based on the split you have now, anything less than 25%, you're not going to get any in that 30 to 50% category. They're all going to be, because now you're at a below of a fraction of 0.5, so you'd never get to, you'd be rounding down, so therefore you wouldn't have it. The other one would work. So again, this is what I talk to, we got to kind of think through if that's what we want to try to do. Again, okay, but make sure it works. And again, this was just some back of the envelope playing around with numbers.
And I certainly appreciate the engineer part. I see your hand, Councilor Landers, I'll get to you. But thank you very much for at least taking us through some examples, so I think everybody more or less understands. I think you get what I want. If we need to go with the language that's more clearly gets us there, I'm fine with that. Councilor Landers?
Well, I was just wondering, Madam Chair, through you, asking our president here, does this discourage developers from coming in? I mean, I know 25 units is minute. Sometimes it isn't worth getting the equipment in there. Well, does this overall, Mr. President, do you feel it would discourage developers?
I want to be careful. I don't want to speak for developers. I think I look at it, what do we as a city want? And we want as a city to make sure we maintain a 10% inventory. So how do we maintain our 10% inventory?
That's key.
If we're gonna hold everything to 10%, any new development, that's good. So 10% of any new development is affordable, we'll get there. The challenge is some of our affordable ones aren't in perpetuity. They have some, they're gonna be falling off the scale. As I try to point to you, for the next 10 years until 2030, our numbers are fine. because they only do the numbers once, they're good for 10 years, and we're good. So our job is, as we're seeing these new projects, where do we want to set it up so we ensure we always have sufficient affordable units? And then the breakdown of affordable units, that to me gets into the next level. But if you set it right at 10, which is good, I mean, I think 10's easy, because that's real simple. It's 10, it may be trouble, and here I go. 40 years down the road, I may not be here, it may not be my problem, but I'll probably guarantee you the 40B rules are probably gonna change in 40 years from now, so maybe it's not. So if you make it right at 10, that's fine. If you want more affordable, you can put it up higher. I recommended 12, but if you want to know what the developers think, they would want 10. I mean, because they know there's gonna be some affordable component in anything, and we've seen the variety of developers. Some, it's easy peasy. They don't think, Andy, they don't think twice about it. Yep, that's what you want. We have other developers, 57 Main Street. You know, you would have thought we were dragging them across the coals for putting affordable. I mean, it's all, and I think what it boils down to is developers, A, don't know about the process, because they're gonna get their money either way, but there is work involved. And I'll be candid, all this affordable stuff, we do great job setting rules, we do a lousy job following up to make sure the rules are implemented. But that's not our job, but that's what I worry about. And I just want to make sure that what we set up, we can implement as a city.
And I will remind you, and I read it, but when we had the Urban Affairs meeting to talk about the veto from the mayor, the language then was the same, that the subject to this section is providing at a, forget the percentage, of the dwelling units to be constructed for home ownership or rental will be made available at affordable prices. And that affordable prices piece is the part that throws everybody off. It's affordable to me, it's not affordable to you, it's not affordable to them. So that's why that additional piece, but also we went from 15% that we approved as a body down to 12% after the mayor's veto. Some of us might not like the fact that we went from 15 to 12, but that was the agreement, and so that's what the language is now. 12% of the dwelling units will be made affordable. Any further questions from you, Councilor Landers?
No.
Okay.
But getting back to that for a minute, I think I was comfortable with 12%.
Okay.
And I think, well, if we all voted for it, we must have all been comfortable with that, no?
All right, so I'm going to just put a need language on the B part. Councilor Perlman?
Yeah, I was just gonna add, and I'd be curious, I know the solicitor didn't necessarily comment on this, but when I read B, of the 12%, and then when it goes into 10% and the 2% makes sense to me of the original 12 when I read through it, so I'd be curious for him to look at that directly and maybe offer, but from at least my legal understanding, it seems to make sense to me of what the percentage would be like. I do think an example is useful. I know you said you didn't see that in other communities. And then with the point that President Ossing made about the fraction, I think I would like to see how other communities are approaching the lower number of total units, because in the example that he gave, any fraction would be rounded up to 1 unit in the way the language is here, correct?
Yes, that's the point, and
so maybe that needs to be clarified, but at least that's how I read the language, is that even if it was 0.05, or it says if equal to or over 1/2, so then if it's over 1/2, then it would be up, but you could say, you know, that other percentage doesn't come into play, but I wouldn't feel comfortable going below the 12, because I want, as was mentioned in that larger meeting, that very affordable category to remain in here, so I appreciate it being in the language.
okay, so Councilor Ossing and I can work, and I believe this again was taken from another city's language. That's the way they had the breakdown. The numbers are obviously different because they had different percentages in the total aspect. Councilor Wagner, did you have a comment, question?
I just wanted to add, I think the percentages are really important, because I feel like we are threading a needle here, because it's not all of a sudden all the developers are going to become altruistic and make sure everyone has the housing they need. The units are going to be jacked up in price so that they'll net the same amount of money, and we're only talking about small percentages, and it's still, just at a fraction, right, what's affordable, that's a bigger conversation, but affordable as the state is operating with that. So the percentage is really important, and I think we're at a good number with finding that balance so that because we keep seeing, this is we can't set the prices, but we're seeing more and more luxury type units with very expensive rents coming in. So even, I just feel like it's our job to think about what do we want for the city and who's going to live here. I mean, even if there's all these folks moving that can afford $2,500, $3,000 a month rent, the city's not going to operate with, I mean, we need people that are earning minimum wage at a little bit more than that to keep everything going, and they have to live somewhere. So I take exception with the mayor's letter. He was talking about people who qualify for Section 8. That's a portion of the part of the community we need to care about, but there's a big percentage of people that are in that middle that aren't going to qualify for subsidies and housing, and that's what this is trying to aim, but also not be too ambitious where it drives up the rent so much that we've got huge disparity of very wealthy people and then people who get Section 8 and nothing in the middle.
Thank you. All right, so the rest of this is really just adjusting the letters at the very beginning. B becomes D. We get down to the old F is now H. Period of affordability, limitations and safeguards shall be imposed to ensure the continued availability of the designated affordable units, and what's being struck is for a minimum of 99 years, or, so it will read, continued availability of the designated affordable units in perpetuity. So we want them to be forever. I think everybody's okay with that. That, I believe, was in the original also. The H, now J, staging of affordable and market rate units, is striking a lot of language that was in here, but I believe that was language that was struck when we had the original. I can read through what's struck if anybody wants me to, but I think, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we could just go back for a second, back to D. I know Council Wagner and I feel the same way. We're trying to have Marlborough residents be able to stay in the city. 70% of affordable dwelling units to eligible residents. Do we have to constitute what is an eligible resident in this? I mean, the whole idea is to have the ability to have housing at a good price for the residents of Marlborough, but is there anything that we have to, that would supersede over anything that we'd have to have any kind of language in there for eligibility for a resident?
This has always been in there, and I have no idea for any of the
Madam Chair,
affordable housing. Councilor Ossing, do
yeah,
you
I
have an
can add
answer?
some insight. So the affordability component of AMI still applies. I mean, it doesn't mean it's opened up to everybody. It's everybody that's income eligible for affordable housing in Marlborough.
But I think his comment was more on the 70%.
Or how do you determine
Legally permissible.
Yeah.
eligible resident? But I guess it goes to the AMI, I guess.
Again, how do we challenge that? I mean, how do I know the Green District one or anybody else is giving 70%? We don't know.
I think some of it is in the language that they put out there, and some, yeah, that was my question when I saw this as we first began amending this. Who's doing this, and how do we know that they're doing it? All right, so we're on page 3, where the alternate site is removed. The language that had the council may allow the developer to build some or all of the affordable housing required on an alternate site. I think that was struck in all of the original. I don't think anybody had an issue with that. The original J and now K, guarantee of performance. No certificate of occupancy shall be issued for any unit within a development subject to this section until all actions necessary to preserve the affordability of the affordable units in compliance with this section and include the affordable units on the subsidized housing inventory, including without limitation a deed restriction, regulatory agreement, and declaration of restrictive covenants, and/or any other restrictive instruments necessary, and all other required documentation have been executed and registered by or recorded by the developer in a form satisfactory to the city council. And I think that was in the last go-around of this. I think it just helped preserve that they were following, put it in a deed, make it be legal language. Councilor Ossing?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, my, and again, I'd ask Jason's input. My concern is, as these bigger projects get built, they don't all get done. So I don't know if this has to be tied to the final occupancy permit or some, it just, when I read this, it sounds like it's got to be done as they're going, and I'm not sure they build them that way. But that, I mean, we have certain rules, so you got to have so many built at certain percentages, but I would just, I'll even follow up with the solicitor. I think that has to be tied to the final one, the final occupancy permit that meets all the regulations for affordability. But again,
Yeah, there's no comments from the solicitor on this, but I'll put a question, solicitor, and see if he has any concerns.
yep, that's fine.
I think we were just trying to clean it up before. I think there was language before that you couldn't have the building permit until something was done, but there was no legal language.
Yep.
We struck about the developments of 19 or fewer units so that nothing was applicable. And we struck the provisions of this section shall not apply to projects which are granted special permits within the Marlborough Village District.
And Madam Chair, if I could ask, why not just strike number 3? I don't understand why there's an exception for, why are we calling out existing, I mean, so what? I mean,
I think the language, this was one that was tagged by the solicitor in the original draft, and he urged us to take out striking this because he thought that there were some concerns within 40A, but I can check with him to see if there's a reason, if he wants to clarify his reason.
again, I just don't know why we're specifying existing retirement community. We're not changing, I mean, if they're already in place, we're not changing anything, so.
I can look. I just remember this one is very specifically, he had said, don't do that now. We need to clarify. So we'll see if he has anything. I had written a note to myself at the very beginning of this. It says all site plan approvals granted for multifamily dwellings as part of a mixed-use development. So in the next part of this would be language that amends 61517, the table of uses, where I'm suggesting we change mixed-use development from a Y, which is by right, to a special permit in the Marlborough Village. So if there's nothing by site plan approval, we may not need to have all site plan approvals because there won't be any. I think the Marlborough Village is the only place within the city that we allowed mixed use by right. I can go through this and double check. But that was change 1. Change 2 is hotels. Changed the yes, meaning by right in the Marlborough Village, to a special permit, and hotels with conference facilities and commercial uses. 21, changed the yes in the Marlborough Village to a special permit. The solicitor does note that these are new. They were not in anything else. And he says just check 650-18 conditions for uses which may need changes. I only did that because I figured if mixed use, which is housing and stores, hotels are still, I just thought they're almost like housing. Do we want them to be by right? And if we do, then we change this. I just put it as do we want to change everything in the Marlborough Village to be special permit? Where before when we had our conversation, we had everything by right. So again, that's one I'm open to further discussion. Okay, page 4. By amending 65034, the Marlborough Village District, the design standards, or amending section A, I'll read number 1. The purpose of the following design standards is to promote quality development, emphasizing the city's sense of history and desire for contextual pedestrian-scaled projects. Supporting streamlined development review, design standards are integral to the Marlborough Village District regulations and must be met as part of any site plan review and approval. So to me, that sentence is pretty strong, must be met as part of any site plan approval. So I changed A, where it started the sentence with non-mandatory, and took from there, the city council will review the design guidelines with the applicant during its site plan discussions. The guidelines will complement the design standards of this section and will provide a guide to the desired appearance and quality of design in the Marlborough Village District. The guidelines are available in the building department and are on the official website of the city. I put that in there because I think it puts the onus on us as the special permit body to make sure we go through that process with the developer. We say, these are the guidelines, these are the design standards, and if what you're showing us on your pictures doesn't meet that, then you need to go back to square one. And it makes it a little more clear. Councilor Perlman?
I support this. I would just change the will to shall, just legally, that is more secure, so.
The guidelines shall complement, or the shall?
Yeah, where it says the guidelines will complement, it should say shall complement. So that's just something in usually legal language to make sure that it's firm.
Okay, I will make that note, shall. And the solicitor's comment is, depending on intent of these changes, it may be advisable to review whether the design standards in the ordinance require any changes along with the design guidelines. To me, I don't think they do, but we could have everybody take a look at that before we meet again. And if we need to update them or change them, that can be part of the whole package. The parking requirements for the Marlborough Village District. I am suggesting that we strike EA2 by striking "and lots within 1,000 feet of the development," insert new language at the end of B1 to read, "unless the use is part of a mixed-use development or off-street parking will be determined during the site plan review process," and amend E2. So it really gets down to,
So, Madam Chair, I mean, striking that, I mean, I don't know any other parking spaces that aren't owned by the city downtown. I mean, just, I mean, if we're saying you gotta provide parking, let's just say you gotta provide parking. I mean, because where else, if you're gonna buy them out, where else are they gonna park? Because that's all we have is city space. We don't have any other space downtown. And again, I'm not trying to be a wise guy. Think about it. You know, where else would you park? There's only city spaces. If you say you can't use city spaces,
and I guess
that was the intent of the whole downtown village, was to use city spaces to park. And if the issue is not, I get back to change the design standards and say the building, any new buildings only be 2 stories and no more than 30 units, and eliminate the issue. All right. I mean, we saw on the corner of 272 Lincoln Street in Cashman, they built 12 units with underground parking, and everybody's okay with that, all right? But on Main, 57 Main, the Maryland Green project, that's got some underground parking. I mean, again, it's not a tonight one, it may not even be the next week one, but you gotta ask yourself, what do you want downtown new development to look like? If the answer is they either have to supply parking, say so. If they don't have to supply parking, if you say they can't park in the municipal lots, well, where are they gonna park? That's my concern.
So-
I did this the night after we had the conversation about the Row property, where we had specifically deleted the lot on Bolton Street, which is within 1,000 feet of the development. And I think what I got the sense from the committee was, we've got the garages, make them use the garages. If that's not the sense, then this is open for discussion, but basically it was spaces in city-owned garages can be counted to fulfill the required spaces. And there's further language in here that I know the solicitor has questioned, but I think if the retail, restaurant, and other business uses eliminate parking minimums per the existing off-street parking was already in there. I added, unless the use is part of a mixed-use development where off-street parking would be determined during the site plan review process. So, again, I think it was mixed use. They didn't have to have any parking for the businesses in the mixed use. All they had to have was for the residential. Councilor Wagner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It makes sense to have that requirement for businesses because they can use, people frequenting the businesses are going to be doing that during business hours, and it's likely that they would be willing to park and walk, and that I wholly agree with what Councilor Ossing said, that I think it's a mistake. Unless we're committed to build another garage and work with the developments, we need to be clear and say, if you're building it, you've got to provide the parking spaces, because that didn't, as we saw with the previous project, it's not going to work. And even saying, then they have to use the garages, well, the first 2 floors don't allow overnight parking, so that's not even an option for residents.
And I guess I was under the impression that we were all in agreement that what we did when we originally did this, to use the garages and let them pay in lieu, was a mistake, and we should never have done it. So I'm trying to fix that problem by saying you can only use the garages, but only up to a certain point. So, and can be, not will be. There's a special permit process. Councilor Dumas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think living in the city for a short period of time and having a car, and I paid for parking as the person who rented out a parking spot. So not only in addition to my rent, I paid for parking. That can be done here in the city for overnight parking. There's just never been a dialogue or discussion to put that back onto the developer to say, hey, your tenants or you can actually find different businesses for overnight parking, create a lease, you will rent out this many parking spots overnight, and that discussion has yet to happen where we can put that ownership back onto them, where they have to find a certain amount of parking spots. Because if there's a supply and demand here, I'm not saying that's the logical explanation, but like that conversation has never happened, where there are other businesses downtown, myself included, that would open up their parking lot and charge rent for people to park there overnight. And I think that's such a missed opportunity that we don't talk about here, because if there's a supply and a demand, then it will happen. But I think that's the direction of the downtown of where we're going, because if you want to bring downtown, you have to provide the parking, and there are multiple parking spots that are not being utilized by private businesses overnight. But I think it's just something to think about. I don't know if we should put that language in here, but it was a discussion that's never been talked about, and I think it's a good argument to have or to bring up with developers.
And I would agree that never happened. Also, the conversation for how to deal with allowing them in the garage. They can buy out their need to have them. And we said you can use the garage, but we don't own the garages. The community development does. So we are not the ones who would issue them that permit. We have no idea how the community development would be issuing those permits. Eventually, I would guess they would run out of spaces, or they could at some point run out of spaces because there's only so many parking spaces. So the whole idea, to me, in hindsight, was just crazy that we said, oh yeah, we'll just let you buy them out and then you can work with this mayor and CDA and figure out this is your parking spot. I have a permit to park right here. Anybody else with comments? I'm just going to mark this as an issue and we can go forward. Okay, I don't think I got to the part about, or I did, eliminating the minimum for off-street parking. So number 2 is the payment in lieu of parking. In the Marlborough Village District, any new commercial or mixed-use structure that is required to provide parking spaces may request to, that's new language, make payments to the city of Marlborough in lieu of providing for all or part of the on-site required parking. Payment made to the city of Marlborough in lieu of providing some or all of the required off-street parking spaces for a project in the Marlborough Village District may, we had shall, I deleted shall, the more official, may be, originally it said shall be allowed by right. Delete the shall, may be granted in the special permit in available spaces only in the 2 downtown parking garages and listed as a condition of the special permit. So the question from the solicitor is, what's the criteria? To me, the criteria is, are there spaces left? I mean, you can do it for a while, and you don't have to do it for anybody. It says they may be granted in the special permit. It's not a automatic, you get to buy them out, and then we're stuck with now, where do they go? A one-time fee to be paid shall be $10,000. I changed it to 20 just because I doubled it, per parking space, which shall be paid prior to the receipt of an occupancy permit. Again, the solicitor's question is, what's the basis? I just doubled it. We could make it higher, we could make it lower. I think we all felt like 10,000 was just not the right number. Council Wagner.
I think I would like to look into that more, because I do agree that it's low, but again, I see that if we really want to develop downtown, there will be a partnership with the city. So Council Orem had been throwing out a number, I forget what it was, but it came out to be, if we were to build a garage, I think it was like, I calculated.
6 million, wasn't it?
200 spaces, it would be about 3 million, I think, was it 6 million?
I thought it was 6.
6 million, okay, 6 million, yeah, right, 6 million. But I wouldn't expect one project to do all of that. We would have a portion of it, they would have a percentage of it, but it would probably be good to see some more real numbers of what would that actually entail. But if we don't even have any intention of being part of that partnership, this language shouldn't even be here right now, because we've been talking about this for years, and we've done nothing.
I think there, at least on my part, I think there's a desire to work with developers, but I think the higher we make it, the more it incentivizes them to have parking on site and not have to deal with where are my people gonna park? Councilor Navin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree. I appreciate your language suggestion on this one. I was not here when this original decision was made for the village district, but I think I'm one of the people you referenced where we all feel like it was a mistake. But having the hindsight is a little bit easier for me to make that call. Just going through with what we just went through, I think, the ability for us to not tie our hands is what this language looks like to me, right? It gives us the ability to work with developers if there is a project that we are looking to help out, if there is a project that is reasonable, that the impact on the parking spaces is something we feel would be reasonable. And I think the increase in so getting rid of the language and just like tying our hands completely the other way doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. So I appreciate that you tried to thread the needle on this one. We just saw that, the number of parking spaces, for the last project that wanted to buy out didn't even cover the cost of what it cost us to acquire those parcels, tear down homes, and pave a parking lot. So we definitely need to see an increase. We need to see an increase just for the fact that things are more expensive, and as things kind of continue to accelerate in cost, buying out a parking spot that is no longer going to be, or buying out a requirement that is no longer going to be able to create in lieu of the spot that, if you don't have to build a spot at your development project, the requirement shouldn't be that you have to buy a third of a spot somewhere else. It should be a 1-for-1, unless it's like, okay, great, well, you don't have a car, but we'll put your Vespa somewhere else. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. So I appreciate what you're doing here. I think if we want to have a dialogue about what that number is, I think it's worth it. But I think an increase is definitely warranted.
Madam Chair?
Counselor Ossing.
Thanks, man. So I'm just going to go to item C, the fees. All right. So I don't know if anybody's read that, but we don't do any of that. Not that we've had any money, but ask yourself, if these funds go in, I think what Councilor Wagner would be pointing to is, if I wanted to build a parking garage, I'm not going to do it with this item C. I would see if it's just fees to be deposited into a special account to be distributed by the council for downtown parking or something. I mean, because this tells you we're gonna be doing just maintenance on the garage for any fees that we collect. I mean, we do that now.
It does, if you go to the next page, land acquisition, design engineering, costs related to adding parking spaces is there. So the money that we take in could certainly be used to build a new garage if you accumulated enough of it, or if we accumulated some and then there was the desire to bond the rest of it. I assume those 2 garages were built via bonds, not
Again,
cash that the
just-
city had in hand.
It was just a suggestion. I just think all that other diverts what I think the intent of the council would be, and that's this council. I'll tell you, go back to the one that set this, said, oh yeah, we're gonna go clean the garage. That was the council back in 2014. Now, this one wants something a little different. So I'm just saying, the more prescriptive the ordinance says how you're gonna use that money, your hands are gonna be tied. And I think it should be more general, because we all see it. These monies are gonna come in, and this council will not be the same, and they're gonna have a different idea of what to do. And
So would you be suggesting then to get rid of the Marlborough Downtown Parking Reserve account, or such account as the city council shall deem appropriate to be used for land acquisition, design engineering services, and construction costs related to adding parking spaces, period? Skip the rest of it?
To me, it's just at the will of the council, but that's
Oh,
just.
so not even for parking spaces? Shall be,
Just say it goes into a downtown account, and accounts, because I see it. 24 years, I don't know how many stabilization funds we've set special permits on. They got Route 20 beautification, pick whatever it was, that 10 years later, the council's not there. Why do we do this? We've got one hanging on, $800,000 for the Joe Delano Entertainment Center downtown. It ain't ever happening. All right, I'll tell you right now. And that should be just another similar stabilization account that just gets rolled into stabilization. Again, they're all done with the great intentions of this body. The body changes, and that passion for it goes away. And no one's gonna go fight for it. Okay, raise your hand if you want the Joe Delano Center down on Main Street. Okay, all right, you're making my point. Right?
so and then we'll go with deposited into the City of Marlborough Downtown Parking Reserve account, or such account as the city council may deem appropriate, period. Request to appropriate funds out of this reserve account, or such account as the city council shall deem appropriate, shall be filed with the city council and referred to the appropriate committee of the city council, which shall have 60 days to forward and comments before a city council vote on the appropriation is taken.
I don't even need all that last 2 sentences, I don't know if you need, but
All right,
I
so
think you see the
get it
point. I
down
mean,
to-
that's-
yeah,
I
all right.
think that's-
Does that seem like the way to go for everybody else? Get rid of, and just let it, okay. I'll look at that one and with you, Counselor Ossing, and, all right, then, number 3 in that piece of payment in lieu is additional reduction in parking requirements. And I almost struck this completely, but the city council may allow the required on-site parking to be reduced by 10% if one of the on-site spaces is dedicated to use by a car share service such as Zipcar, and an agreement with a car share service to place a vehicle at the site is provided, period. This allowance would be a condition of the special permit. Councilor Wagner.
I haven't looked into numbers. Was 10% pulled out
That
of a
was
hat,
the
so to
original
speak,
language.
or-
That-
okay.
that was the
I mean, have we
original.
seen others, because 10, if there's 100 units, that's 10 spaces, so that'd only be, saying 9. So does a zip car really, I mean, it feels like a couple of spaces, but it doesn't, like, how many people really it's used occasionally, usually. I don't see, 10 spaces seems like a lot.
Well, it depends. It's required on-site parking reduced by 10%. So it depends on what's required. Every project's going to have a different required number of parking spaces.
Right. No, I
based on
get that, but it seems like 10% seems like a lot. It just, when you think about it in hard numbers as opposed to percentages, it just seems like
So look
a
into
lot.
reducing, that's what it was. I kept it at that, but originally it was,
I mean, I'd be curious, it probably wouldn't be that hard to find. Other developments, have they done something similar to this? Was 10% a good number? Did they find that was still, it became a problem for people to find parking? I have no idea. It doesn't, my experience with people who've used zip cars, it's occasional, and I could see it maybe a couple of spaces, smaller percentage, but 10% feels like a lot.
Counselor Nabin?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. This was, and it totally, right, it became apparent in the last one. If you have a larger project, and then it's gonna be a lot of parking spaces, 10%, right? You got out of 8 spots for only having 1 zip car. That doesn't really seem, I think, to mesh well. Also, I would be interested to know how prevalent zip car is out here at this point still. I mean, once Uber and Lyft and rideshare came on the scene, I don't think a lot of people were saying, I'll just, go down to the garage, hopefully, book the zip car and I'll go to the grocery store. They don't, they just go and, they Uber to the grocery store and whatnot. So it just seems like a large reduction. It's great if it's a, 30 unit, project, and then you're really not, you're talking about 1 or 2 spaces for 1 car to share. So I think we should take a look at that.
And it was very controversial with the last one we did, and that's why I was like, just strike it, and then I said, maybe it's, so I put a lower the 10% and then discuss, so.
So, Madam Chair, again, I go back to in 2014, when we were working on this, no one envisioned a 100-unit facility coming downtown. Nobody did. We were all thinking these quaint little 20, 30-unit complexes were coming in, so the 10% was gonna be 2 spaces or something, so it seemed reasonable. I get back to, if you don't want a 100-unit facility, limit the size, whether it's height or size, of projects that are gonna get downtown. Now, whether, can they be built? I don't know, because the builder, they'll maximize it to whatever they can. But if you don't want a 100-unit facility, say it. I mean, that's,
So moved.
Or not have this, which may be the discussion at the end that we decide to delete that completely. All right, just quickly to go through the final part of this is F, heights of structures. What this would read would be to encourage redevelopment and reuse of parcels within the Marlborough Village District. Minimum and maximum heights are established. Minimum height shall be 35 feet, maximum height is 6 stories and up to 70 feet, except for where a proposed structure is within 50 feet of a residential district boundary, where the height limit shall be 52. Then we went in and modified the language and added, by grant of a special permit, maximum building height, including building areas within 50 feet of a residential district boundary, may be increased to 7 stories and up to 85 feet. So I say, get rid of that language. Bring it back to only what's required or what's allowed. We're not going to do any exceptions for structures because we got convinced by the attorney and the developer it was a good idea. Councilor Austin?
again, Madam Chair, you see what the developers are doing. So we've got 3 projects downtown, and I kind of don't count the one on South Bolton, but it is downtown. But the 2 on downtown have all maximized height and size to the fullest extent that they could. So I get back to, if you only want a 3-story or 4-story building, say it. Just they may not build, but they haven't built yet anyway. So, I mean, so I don't know what the right answer is, but from the last 57 Main Street, it's pretty clear no one wants a 5-story, 100-unit building downtown. Then say it. Don't, right now, he's within his rights, he can do it.
Right. And I didn't want to mess with going back through that, what was allowed. I thought we did a fairly good job at the beginning of what should be allowed, but we can certainly take a look. It would then, in the notes by the solicitor, changes here may also require updating 650 attachment 2 of the City of Marlborough tab of lot areas, yards, and heights of structures. So if we really do want to change, and this is specific to Marlborough Village, if we want to change the maximum height 6 stories and up to 70 feet, except where they are within 50 feet of a residential boundary where it's only 52 feet, we can have that discussion, and that could be added to changes that we're doing. Because I think at this point, it's not up for changing anything within the code, but it's pretty open to encompassing what we need to get what we want in the end. And then number 2, the roof decks piece. Roof decks providing recreation and amenity areas for residents on the roof shall be encouraged in the Marlborough Village District. Roof decks may include open spaces, open air areas covered by permanent roofs, indoor areas, storage spaces for mechanical equipment, enclosures for elevators and stairs. The portions of a building design as a roof deck shall be subject to maximum height restrictions. And then I struck through as may be increased by special permit, because if we get rid of that grant to go higher, they wouldn't be able to go higher. And then finally, a proviso for the Marlborough Village: any project for which only a site plan was required that has an unexpired site plan from the City Council granted before the date these amendments were submitted to the City Council will not be impacted by these changes. The solicitor's comments were some of these changes will affect land outside of Marlborough Village. We may want to address how projects received a special permit and the date that they. So I went back through. We have, I believe, 3 special permits that we've approved. Alta Marlborough was approved in July of 2022 for 276 units. I think they're going forward, and I don't think there's a need to put anything in there, but maybe. We have 272 Lincoln LLC with 12 units and Valeris Marlborough 140 units. We revised that approval on September of 2022. Those are the only 3 special permits that I could find within the 20 to 22. Anything else that hasn't been built, I believe, is expired.
But I'm struggling with the solicitor's comment, Madam Chair. I thought this only applies to the Marlborough Downtown Village District, the changes you're making.
Well, but I think he thinks there should be another proviso, maybe in the other part of this, in the affordable, or, I mean, that is pretty specific to Marlborough Village, that proviso.
Yeah.
I don't know if we really need to have one. I can look into it further, talk to him to see
yeah,
if there
I'll-
needs to be another proviso that for special
Affordable.
permits approved.
Yeah, for affordable housing and the stuff that we've got.
Yeah, for the
Right.
affordable housing piece. We want to make sure that they don't get impacted. As far as I know, they're pretty solid with what they have. So unless they don't go forward and somebody takes over, we should be good. All right, so we're a little after 9. Is everybody comfortable with where they are? There's a lot to think about. Hopefully, people that were absent from this will be able to watch it, and then we can move forward. Council Perlman?
I just had a question if the solicitor would be at the next meeting.
I had asked him to try to come tonight. He did not respond. I think he may feel a little uncomfortable being here and offering opinions until it's actually referred to him. It was nice of him to take a look at what I sent him, to just sort of give some initial input. I think he's probably willing to answer questions that I think I've notated throughout this to see if he has any anything further to add to it. I can check back in with him and see, but my guess is he probably isn't going to sit in the well and be able to answer one-on-one questions, unfortunately. I would ask Karen to send out an email to get everybody's July schedules. I leave again on Saturday, so I'll be gone another week, so that's pretty much the end of June. But if we know what July schedules are, I can try to set up another meeting to continue this discussion, probably throw in a few of the other items that we have before us as they get ready to go, so we stay on schedule with those.
Motion to,
Yep, I was gonna just move to adjourn then for this evening.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor? 4, so we are adjourned at 10 after 9. I guess, 8 after 9 to be official.